You know what sounds beautiful? Minnesota. You know what else is beautiful? Knowing that the lottery has generated billions of dollars for our state. Money that has gone to help protect wildlife and habitat and improve our air and water quality. At the Minnesota Lottery, we're playing our part. You can too. Just say, I'm in.
Well, things are starting to green up. The water in the lakes is warming up, and our new fishing season is upon us. And everyone is asking, where should I be going to fish? And I think today I've got an answer for you. Hey there, Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories, presented by Connecticut Water Treatment Systems. You know, my family uses Connecticut. You should too. Also, a big time welcome to our newest sponsor, Voyager Saunas. Excited to have them on board. Also, our good friends at Oreo and Ritz Crackers, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, also the Minnesota Propane Association, Caldwell Banker Realtor Heather Womack, and the Minnesota Lottery. Okay, it's that time of year. We're getting fishy. Everybody's back on the water. So where do you go to fish? And this time of year, for me, it's a tale of two stories, right? Since this darn COVID thing hit, the border with Canada is shut down. You know, the news is not real good on the Canadian side of things because all of that Minnesota traffic goes to Canada. But because of that, we are flourishing here in Minnesota. Exactly why I wanted Joe Henry, the Executive Director of Tourism for Lake of the Woods, along today, because Joe, things are pretty magical for the most part on the U.S. side of Lake of the Woods. How are you?
I'm doing well, Bill. How you doing?
I am wonderful. And, you know, for so long, Lake of the Woods has been the ultimate fishing destination. I mean, a monstrous lake, 14,000 islands, a place to get lost. And every darn time I fish on your lake, there's a fishtail. How did things go this winter? Lots of people fishing, I'm guessing.
Yeah, a lot of people fishing. Yeah, it was a busy winter for sure. And you know, I think you hit it on the head. You know, with the pandemic, and you know, we all know that outdoor recreation and fishing and that sort of thing has been so popular that people really got into the outdoors. And you know, ice fishing's a popular sport anyway. It's growing in popularity. You know, just for a number of reasons, we were real busy and. You know, fishing overall was good. I mean, you know, you get to that midwinter, and you know, it depends on where you're fishing. That those fish get spread out, and you know, a lot of times you're picking at the saugers and picking at the walleyes, and kind of putting together a whole day. And but early on, it was hot and heavy, and of course, we heard of flurries throughout the year. Of course, a ton of big fish caught, a lot of big walleyes in Lake of the Woods.
Yeah, there were a lot of pictures online this year. A lot of happy people holding up fish bigger than they had ever caught before. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to get right to it. Northwest Ontario is a huge destination for anglers. 98% of their business comes from the United States, and a good chunk of that is right here in the Midwest. People cannot get over the border. Haven't been able to for, a year and a half now. So you know where they're going? To Minnesota resorts. Business has been at a record pace. And I'm guessing you're hearing that or seeing that.
Yeah. You know, for Lake of the Woods, we do have, you know, the resorts that we have in Badette and along the Rainy River and along the south shore of Lake of the Woods, yeah, they're doing really well. And you know, when this whole thing hit back in mid-March of 2020, you know, we had really good ice, and with the walleye season being open on Lake of the Woods through April 14th, fish houses don't have to be off the ice until, you know, end of March. We lost 2 weeks of really, really good ice fishing, which put a dent into our revenue. And, you know, we're like, oh man, that's a bummer. Hope this thing ends soon. And then it led into spring fishing, where we couldn't do any spring fishing on the Rainy River that's traditional, no sturgeon fishing. And then it led into the summer. Well, then what happened was if you remember on the Minnesota fishing opener, they said, okay, you can go fishing with a guide. You can get out there and go fishing, but you can only have a guide and 2 customers.
Right.
And that doesn't work real good for a charter boat that takes 6 people.
Right.
It
And I
just doesn't
remember
work.
a lot of those charter captains were upset at that moment, but things changed fairly quickly, right?
They did. Yep. So at the beginning of June, when we had permission to, take more than, 2 people with a guide, then the doors started opening, and the reservations that were lost started filling in again. We had existing customers coming. We had new customers coming. And, naturally, if you're used to going to Canada, you're going to take a look at those far northern destinations, Lake of the Woods, northernmost point of the contiguous U.S. and a walleye factory. So naturally, we were one of the lakes on the list that people would consider. And, we had a lot of bookings. And, ever since, business has been very, very good. There's still openings up there to go fishing, but it's been good. Now, it's kind of a tale of 2 lakes. The pandemic has created winners and losers in a lot of different industries. And so as much as our South End resorts are doing really well, you get up to the Northwest Angle.
Right.
And,
there's a catch.
Oh, man, yeah. So for listeners that aren't familiar with the angle, the Northwest Angle is that little tip of Minnesota that sticks up into Canada. And in order to travel to the Northwest Angle, you have to drive about 40 miles through Canada, through Manitoba, and then you enter back into the United States up at the Northwest Angle. With the Canadian border being shut down, that way for customers to get to the Northwest Angle resorts was cut off. So in essence, our Northwest Angle resorts were dealing with some of the same kind of pain that our friends on the Ontario or Manitoba side of the border are dealing with, where their American customers can't get to them. Now, certainly, we people could go on Lake of the Woods and stay in Minnesota and get up there, but that's 40 plus miles across big open water, which most people aren't able to do. We have a transport service, the Lake of the Woods transport service, and that'll take you up via charter boat. But as soon as you add hassle to people, you add cost. Some people typically enjoy trailering their own boats up to the Northwest Angle. As soon as you mess that up, you really drop off in numbers. And it's just been tough up there. So it's a tale of 2 lakes. South End, doing really well. Up north, a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and that South End, it's funny because I keep tabs online, and you'll see a post that will say, hey, great news. The weekend of June 4th, we had 1 cancellation. We've got a cabin. You can bring 3 people. That's how busy they are. They are booked to the gills.
It's busy. We're fortunate, Lake of the Woods. We have a lot of different kind of resorts. You have your big full service resorts all the way down to your little teeny weeny resorts. And there's still openings around the area. So if people want to come up to Lake of the Woods, there's still, you can find some openings. But it's been good, Bill, as you know, and that's not just Lake of the Woods. That's all of northern Minnesota and really most outdoor destinations.
And it's been fun because for the better part of the last year, right again, in spring, there was fear. Nobody knew what was happening. Everything was shut down. We thought, oh no, things are dire. And then people started getting outdoors, and all of a sudden it was a record pace for resorts. But we've talked to resorts along the Gunflint where they've made so much money that they were able to buy a new grooming machine for the trails. So now the trails, the cross-country trails during the winter are epically good. Resorts that were in a transition, they've made so much money that they were able to renovate and clean things up and rebuild to get ready for the next 50 years of their business. Those are wonderful stories in a time when everything seems to be doom and gloom. Mm-hmm. That's pretty fun for me. All right. We are talking with Joe Henry, the Executive Director of Tourism for Lake of the Woods. I want to get a fish story from you, but hang tight. We need to pay some bills. And up first, I would like to welcome our newest sponsor and partner here at the podcast, Voyager Saunas. They are custom-built saunas for your home, the backyard, your business, or the Shirk family. We picked one of Voyager's mobile saunas. They literally go anywhere we want to go as a family. They use clear grade cedar benches, spray foam insulation, I picked the Kuma wood-fired stove, but you can also get a Hilo electric heater. These are Finnish-influenced hand-built saunas that will last your family a lifetime. They are awesome, and they are constructed with care by the hometown Voyageurs team. Again, my family, we love the mobile sauna. It's on wheels, and we can pull it anywhere we want to go. Voyageur, a Minnesota movement influenced by Finnish culture. Visit voyageursaunas.com and get ready to distress. I promise you, it's working for the Shirk family. Also, today is a great day for adventure, and Cub Foods has all the Nabisco snacks you need to make sure your adventure is delicious from start to finish. You know, life is just sweeter for the Shirk family when we share Oreo cookies on the trail, when the kids crunch Ritz crackers at our favorite campsite. We also have this reputation for rocking the boat with Ritz cheese crispers. Do me a favor and stop at Cub Foods on the way to your next adventure. The great outdoors is calling. Be sure to bring your Nabisco snacks. Also, a big thank you to the Minnesota Propane Association.
Hi, I'm Laura Shera, and do you really know what it costs to heat water at your home, cabin, or business? No? Well, we do. Based on data from the U.S. Department of Energy, the average annual savings for homes that heat their water with propane rather than electricity is $175. You can save energy and get 2.5 times as much hot water compared to the average electric water heater. Let's save energy and money with a cleaner, greener fuel. Propane, the right energy right now.
All right, Joe Henry, the Executive Director of Tourism for Lake of the Woods, is joining me today. You are a proponent of all things tourism around Lake of the Woods, but you're also a guy who loves to fish. Why is Lake of the Woods so unique? Why is it such an unbelievable fishery?
Yeah, it is. It's a special natural resource, and you know there's a lot of good fisheries in the Midwest for walleyes. But I tell you, Lake of the Woods. They call Lake of the Woods the walleye capital of the world, and good friends on other good walleye bodies of water might poke fun and argue that a little bit. But I'll tell you what, Bill. It's I'm not telling anything you don't know. First off, there's millions of walleyes. Secondly, there's saugers, the cousin to the walleye, and that adds a lot of really, really good fishing and good eats too, good fish fries.
Yep.
And then you have, a couple other things going on there. You got a trophy walleye fishery. I fish walleye tournaments, and some lakes I go to, if you catch a 27-inch walleye, which is about a 7-pounder, that's a big fish for that. That's a real big fish for that body of water. When you go to Lake of the Woods, we have the big fish gene pool in our lake that produces just really big walleyes. To produce big walleyes, you got to have a few things. Number one, you got to have the right gene pool in your system. Secondly, you typically have big water. And third, normally the DNR tells me that when you have a fishery that has monster walleyes and monster pike for that matter, normally you have a good population of tulibies in that body of water. And, we have all that. So, we have a lot of big fish. We have all the makings for trophy walleyes, and we have a slot limit on Lake of the Woods, 19.5 inches to 28 inches. That's a protected slot. You take a picture, you throw those fish back. I'll tell you what, most of those fish, if we didn't have that protected slot, they'd be ending up in coolers.
Yes, for sure.
Those big fish are being put back in the system. That allows those fish to grow to 30, 32, 33, 34 inches. That also allows those fish to reproduce. The reason that slot limit, Bill, starts at 19.5 is because that's when a female walleye matures to spawning grade on Lake of the Woods is at 19.5 inches typically. So 19.5 to 28, you throw them back. If you want to keep one trophy over 28, you're allowed to do that. Most people are getting, or a lot of people, I should say, are getting a graphite mount nowadays, so they don't even, take that fish. They'll take a picture and put her back. But, and then, there's another thing too. Sustainability of our fishery. We have great spawning. Lake of the Woods. I mean, yeah, everybody talks about the Rainy River in the spring and the fish going up to spawn in the Rainy River, and they do. But we got, Lake of the Woods. When you consider the U.S. and Canada side, it's over 1 million acres. And we have 14,552 islands in our lake. We have a lot of feeder streams, and we have over 65,000 miles of shoreline. I mean, there are a gazillion places walleyes spawn. So if you have one area of the lake that gets a blast of cold water right after those walleye eggs were laid, and those eggs go to pot, they don't make it. You got lots and lots of other places on the lake that those eggs will make it because you didn't get the same kind of weather, the same kind of flush of cold water, whatever the case might be. Heck, there's times where you could be fishing on the south end, maybe in the river, and you catch a walleye that's spawned out, and you go up north and catch a walleye, and it's still full of eggs. So there's different ecosystems going on within the lake, and ultimately that adds to sustainability. I think the other thing is when you talk about lakes that have a perceived walleye problem, they always say, the biologists will tell you, a lot of times a walleye problem equates to a forage problem. And that's not a problem we have on Lake of the Woods. We have so many different kind of forage walleyes can eat. Of course, the emerald shiner, young of the year perch minnows that live in the deep, tulibies. We got crayfish. We got critters that hatch out of the mud, different kind of insect hatches with larvae. We got bloodworms. I mean, I could go on. But, my point is, if you have a forage that isn't doing so good this year, you got about 10 to 15 other forage species to pick up the slack. And what that does is ultimately make sure there's a lot of food in the lake for the walleyes and adds to sustainability. So kind of a long answer, but you ask, why is Lake of the Woods such a good fishery? And I'm just speaking of walleyes. I'm not touching on pike, muskies, smallmouth, jumbo perch,
Right.
eel pout, sturgeon. I mean,
Muskies up there are so magical. But I'm going to be honest, right? There's this report that's circulating on the internet right now saying Lake of the Woods can't be sustainable as a fishery with its current pressure. What do you make of that study?
Well, the study I saw floating around, first off, that study was from Canada.
Yep.
And, they talk about the increased pressure of sport fishing and commercial netting. And, I do know, talking to our Northwest Angle guides, and I don't know the ins and outs of that report. I don't want to, make any inferences, but I do know that there, is a lot more netting going on up there. I've heard that for the last couple of years. I don't know what role that plays. I can tell you that, a number of years ago, back in the late 80s, Lake of the Woods got rid of, the Minnesota side got rid of all of its commercial netting.
Right.
A joint effort between the DNR and the resort community. And when that happened, we could see our fish numbers go up for many species, specifically, walleyes and sturgeon. But so, yeah, I don't know what part of it's that and what part of it's sport fishing. You know what? I'm glad they're paying attention to it. I'm glad the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources is watching it. And, if there is any kind of an issue going on, I'm glad they're going to do something about it. I'm on the fisheries committee on the south end of the lake. And, I would say that the Minnesota DNR does a very, very nice job of really keeping tabs on what they believe, is going on in the fishery. They do everything from, they do a spring seining where they get the young of the year fish. They can see what kind of hatch we had. What kind of forage do we have in those nets? They do a fall gill netting sample that they've done for years and years so they can compare. They do electroshocking in the Rainy River. That gives them a good understanding of, typically they do that in the spring for walleyes. And that gives them a good understanding of, what kind of walleyes are spawning up there, size, sex, all those different things. That combined with creel surveys they do. And of course, what a creel survey does is it measures how much traffic, how much fishing pressure you have on your lake, along with what they believe the harvest rates have been. So they take all of these different factors and they put them into a formula and they make recommendations. And, they kind of use a 3-year rolling average so that there's no knee jerks based on 1 year of increased fish house pressure because the lakes south of us have really poor ice, let's say, or whatever. Remember that last year? So, so anyway, with all that being said, we really do rely on, our DNR fisheries department up at Lake of the Woods. And I think they're credible as heck. I think they do a great job. And we really lean on them to provide information and make the recommendations moving forward. And the one thing I can tell you is there certainly has been talk about a lot of pressure on Lake of the Woods. There's more pressure, Bill. The wheelhouses are very, very popular, and they do a
For
lot of
sure.
wonderful things, getting people into fishing, getting families into fishing. But, wheelhouses also make it so that people can fish a lot longer, that they have their lines down all the time. It makes
Yep.
it so, it's just real life. Technology, right? It's look at the depth finders we use, the side scan. The boats, Lake of the Woods has gotten a lot smaller. Nowadays to have a 20-foot boat with a 300 on it isn't that big. A lot of people have them. So
Right.
consequently, they're fishing parts of the lake that really didn't get hit too much before. So there are a number of things that are pushing the limits on our walleye population. And I think, like any body of water, what we need to do is every year or so take a look at it and say, hey, where do things pan out? Where do we think the walleye numbers are? How is our forage doing? What kind of pressure do we have in a lake? And what kind of sustainability do we have? If at some point in time, and I have no idea what will happen until we meet as a group, but at some point in time, if we take a look and say, it would be healthiest for the lake to do something with the limits or whatever the case might be, well, then let's make that a consideration. If the lake is healthy as is with our slot limit and our current limits, well, then let's leave her alone. But again, I think that's something that we just have to take a look at.
I've always been amazed a little bit, right? You go up there during the winter, and we've done a lot of trips, and we've been with a lot of people who want to go up there and fill a cooler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nick Anthony is a good friend of mine. He runs the operation at Ballard's Resort, and we'll joke a little bit because people will say, "Oh, the fishing's been slow today," and they've caught 60 fish,
mm-hmm.
right? You're mucking through saugers and walleyes to get to those 6 fish, and you're catching bonus perch as part of the process too, right? I've always been amazed by that because as an angler, I enjoy the adventure of it versus how many fish will I physically bring home. That's never been on my radar. It's more about being on the ice, the view, watching somebody catch that trophy fish that slides back in.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it for me, Joe, I think people need to change the reasons they fish a little bit.
Yeah.
Forget about filling the cooler. I had a friend a long time ago say, you know what, tonight we can have a unbelievably good T-bone steak on the grill to cap off a great day of fishing. And I think that's important. We're going to have to change the way people think about some of these fishing trips.
Yeah.
And I know I get pushback when I say that, right? Minnesota is talking about, what about a 4-fish limit? And people just get bent out of shape. But long-term, for sustainability, we have to change some of the things we do.
Yep, I agree with you. I really do. And, so the limit on Lake of the Woods is a combined limit of 6 fish, walleyes and saugers. Up to 4 of those 6 can be walleyes. And that's a year, that's year round. So during the open fishing season. So, that's our limit right now. And, one of the things I take a look at is our Northwest Angler resorts. When things are normal up there, our Northwest Angle is surrounded on 3 sides by Canada. So naturally, a lot of the fishing of people that go to the Northwest Angle, when the border isn't closed, people will slide into Ontario waters. And when they go into Ontario waters, the limit of walleyes is 2. And
yes,
they have a great time. They have fish fries and they make memories and they have unforgettable trips. And it's wonderful. And, when you think about it, it wasn't that long ago that the limit on Lake of the Woods was 6 walleyes and 8 saugers. 14. And that was not that long ago.
Think about that. That is insane to me. And you're right. It's 6. I'm sorry. I said 8 earlier, but it's 6 combined between the two. But what do you even do with 14 fish, right?
Well, and I hate to say it, but back in the day, man, when I was in college, I'd go up there and it was almost a challenge to get your 14, and you'd get them and you'd bring them home and, you'd have a bunch of meals, you'd give some to relatives. And but we didn't need to do that. I would have been just as happy if the limit was 6 or 4 or whatever, because it was so much more, to your point, about the experience. Still could bring home some fish. Nowadays, I mean, you think about it, Bill. How many lakes can you go to where you can consistently catch a meal of walleyes?
Right.
Let alone
Right.
keep them, because we have so many lakes now. They have special regulations, and so to your point, I agree 100%. We need to be thinking about sustainability of our fisheries. I would much rather have be promoting people to come up and enjoy themselves at a healthy lake with lower limits than trying to get people to come up and enjoy our lakes where the limits are the same, but the lake isn't quite so healthy.
Yep. It's interesting in talking with the biologists, when you drop, and this is a general statement for many walleye fishing lakes, when you drop the number of fish you keep by one, it has zero impact on the lake or the population. It is purely a move to change mindset. They tell us that you have to get to keeping only 2 fish to have an impact, a positive impact on the population. That's how much work we have ahead of us on this topic. And it's not about Lake of the Woods. It's about, the lakes we fish as a whole. Over time, just with the number of people fishing, we just have to change how we think. Okay, that's the hard part of this story. Let's get to the good. But first, we need to pay just a couple more bills here. I want to talk about Connecticut. The Shirks absolutely love Connecticut water. It's no secret. We've always been that way, right? We live out in the country and we have that ironclad well water. Well, we treat all of ours with a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. We also use Connecticut's K5 drinking water system. That white buildup you get on your faucets? We get none of that. Our dishes are clean. Probably my biggest push right now for Connecticut is the Shirk boys, Brady and Bennett, before they go to hockey practice, before they go to soccer practices, they always want to fill their water bottles with Connecticut water. They don't want to get it from the drinking fountain wherever they're going. So call Connecticut, do what the Shirks did, and look forward to clean, safe water. Also, I'd like to thank Caldwell Banker Realtor Heather Womack.
Hi, Minnesota Bound podcast listeners. I'm Realtor Heather Womack. I grew up in Minnesota and love all the outdoor activities we have here. In fact, I love Minnesota so much that I moved back here from Europe to raise my family in the land of beautiful hikes, refreshing clear lakes, and winter fun. That's why I'm reaching out to the listeners of the Minnesota Bound podcast. As a realtor, I've helped hundreds of folks buy their first home, sell the home they have, purchase a lake cabin, or start investing in Minnesota real estate. If you love adventure but need some new scenery, call me. My website is heatherwomackrealty.com. That's Heather Womack, WOMACK, realty.com.
And finally, a big thank you to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
Minnesota's wildlife management areas are a vast array of lands all across Minnesota. These 1,440 wildlife management areas are valued not only for wildlife, but also for Minnesota's outdoor recreation opportunities. They maintain hunter walking trails, plant food plots for wildlife, and develop acres and acres of prairie and grasslands. To find out more, go to mndnr.gov/WMAS.
Okay, Joe Henry is my partner in crime today. Joe, Lake of the Woods is home to you. Let's get back to the resorts and the record pace right now. As we're getting ready for fishing opener and spring into early summer, what are you hearing as far as resorts? Are there places people can find a spot to book, or are things just locked up right now?
There's openings. Things are busy. I mean, there are not a lot of openings. Some resorts might be filled up during some of the opportune weekends, but it seems like you got to remember we got 50 plus lodging facilities around the lake, and a lot of those small resorts some people have probably never even heard of because
right.
they're not on they don't do a lot of advertising and things like that. So, one of the things we do is we have this lodging availability finder on our website where somebody can put in what part of the lake they want to stay and send out an email with the dates. And, resorts have the opportunity to chime back in if they have any openings. And it's kind of a quick way rather than dialing for dollars, and that works out real nice. But no, it's busy, no doubt. But there are some openings out there, and it's just the way it is right now. And it's funny, the opening of fishing, May 15th this year. People think I think they think that we're so busy on the opener, and actually there's openings early in May, and of course we really start getting busy as we get into June. That's really
because the weather gets nice and the fishing just is good.
And I think kids are out of school, and the fishing is good. I mean, you go out in May and June, and that's a jig bite, and not only is it a jig bite, that you can go out and jump on a charter boat. It's not real expensive to jump on a charter boat. Rods, reels, tackle, bait, licensed charter captain. I mean, you've been with Nick Anthony out on the charter boat. It's so nice. It's so relaxing. You don't have to think about navigation. You don't have to think about what the fish are doing today. If you go to a spot that you were at yesterday where the walleyes were, and they're not there today, a guy like Nick has networked with 5 or 6 other charter boats where he can make a couple phone calls and he knows what's going on in that lake real quick. So that puts success on your side. The other flip side of that is that if somebody wants to bring up early in the year a 16 or 18 foot boat and go out and fish the Rainy River, 4 Mile Bay, out in front of close to shore, those fish aren't going to be way out. They're going to be tight.
Give us one spot up there that is not Lake of the Woods that you love to visit.
That's not Lake of the Woods. You mean something other than fishing?
River, small lakes. I mean, do you have other spots that you like to go?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not asking you to give away a secret. Yeah. I just want you to give away a secret.
No, I'll give away secrets. You know what? So, I will. The one thing I like to think about is, so give me an example. When I fish walleye tournaments, there's times where I'll go to my go-to spot, and maybe things pan out, maybe they don't, but then I'll end up doing oftentimes a milk run, as I call it, where I'll go and I'll hit 6, 7 spots. And a lot of times these spots aren't real big spots. They're off the radar screen. They don't attract, they're not community holes. But man, I mean, even along the shoreline, if you look on whether you use, Humminbird or Lowrance or Garmin or Navionics or whatever you like using, LakeMaster, you look at your map and zoom it in when you're sitting at home, and zoom it in and look along the shorelines and look at all the little nooks and crannies you have. When you go to the Rainy River, Bill, Rainy River is real popular for walleye fishing, certainly in the spring like we just had. And by the way, Did you see the number of huge walleyes that were caught this spring?
Yes, it's insane. The pictures are just almost unbelievable.
So I have to laugh at a couple of things, and this is just human nature too, but I have to laugh. First off, an article comes out from the Canadian side talking about how they're a little bit worried about fish populations and stuff, and it's psyching people out. Yet you go on social media and there's a couple of guys in a boat that catch 6 fish over 30 inches in one day. I mean, and this is happening all over the place. Maybe not 6 over 30, but they're catching big fish up and down the river. And then the bite will stop abruptly because we get a blast of rain and it dirties up the water for a few days. We're still picking at fish. But my only point to that is that the Rainy River gets a lot of attention in the spring when those fish are going up there to spawn. We have that extended season through April 14th. And then it gets a lot of attention in the fall because traditionally, there's an emerald shiner run up the Rainy River in the fall, and the walleyes will follow, and it's a big fall fishery. Well, you know what? Imagine you bring your boat up, and it's screaming 35 miles an hour. You probably don't want to be on the big lake during that time. There's 42 miles of navigable Rainy River from the Wheelers Point area, which is at the mouth of the Rainy, all the way up to Birchdale. And there are spots and nooks and crannies to fish all along. I was talking to somebody once, and he said, it was a kind of a blow day, and we had our boats up there. So what we did is some of the guys slept in, and then they went looking around town, and they went and had lunch, and that was great. All we did is we just went along shore, and we're pitching jigs. We're pitching docks and pitching different reed edges and things. And my gosh, we caught walleyes, we got pike, we got smallmouth, we got crappies, we got perch. Everything lives in the river. And even though the walleyes are famous for spring and fall in the river, there's a local resident population of walleyes that will stay in that river all year long. There's some really good fishing to be had there.
And it's easy, meaning you're not out on the big water. And like you said, when you get to avoid wind, certain days that's a good thing.
And I'll tell you another couple spots too that are kind of off the radar screen. So one of them is, 4 Mile Bay. So 4 Mile Bay is where the Rainy River, dumps into Lake of the Woods. And there's a great big bay. Doesn't get much attention. But, the water on Lake of the Woods is stained water. It means it's got that little bit of a coffee color. And what that means is that those walleyes, they'll eat all day long. In fact, they eat better during the day than they do at night. So you can go in the 4 Mile Bay and you can pull a crawler harness in 5, 6, 7 feet of water and have a super productive day. You get on the edge of that where the Rainy River is going out to the Lighthouse Gap, out to the main lake, and you get on that edge of that river and you can be pulling spinners along there. You can be, jigging along that edge. You can get up on an edge of a reed pile up in 4 Mile Bay. Heck, you want to go up there and cast for pike. I mean, the opportunities are endless. A lot of smallies up there. Same thing with the Bostic Bay. Bostic Bay is kind of behind Morris Point there. Same kind of situation. And then another one, of course, is Zipple Bay. Zipple Bay is like an inland lake. So on certain days, whether it's windy or not windy, you can go in Zipple Bay and you can catch tons of pike. Sometimes walleyes will move in and out of that bay. You get some jumbo perch in there. So my only point to that is that there are a lot of spots that are off the radar screen compared to the spots that attract 50 boats out in front where everybody's swinging nets,
So now nobody has any excuse not to catch fish up there. Joe, thanks so much today for joining us. And again, COVID has been such a story, and there's been so much negative associated with it. I love that there's some good news, and that is that most of the resorts up in your neck of the woods they're all flourishing right now. We're happy about that.
Other than the Northwest Anglo resorts, which is a little bit of an anomaly, but our resorts are doing well, and I tell you, we certainly count our blessings. That's for sure.
Yep, no doubt. Well, I look forward to getting into the boat with you real soon. In the meantime, have a great opener, and thanks again.
Thanks much, Bill. Let's get out fishing.
So there you go. That's the latest on Lake of the Woods. Thank you so much for joining us for the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Of course, these shows don't just happen. We have great partners who help us get out to you each week. Kinetico Water Treatment Systems. My family uses Kinetico, and yours should too. Also, again, a big welcome to our newest sponsor, Voyager Saunas, Oreo and Ritz Crackers, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Minnesota Propane Association, Caldwell Banker Realtor Heather Womack, and the Minnesota Lottery. Thanks again for listening. Today I'm Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. Until next time, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors.